Have you considered upkeep management to keep armies smaller and more agile, more needing to fight? Or do you think you will achieve that via other map objectives, Solnaga watchtowers, relics, maybe capture points, capture the flag, and so on?
Yeah, there's a lot of things being talked about here. I'll start with the...
Don't forget a single one.
Oh, no. That's a lot of pressure.
All right. So, hello, Grubsters. Enjoy this special exclusive look into the minds of the members who are part of the newly formed gaming studio Frost Giant. They're presenting us with their freshly announced Stormgate game, an RTS intended for everyone from sweaty tryhards to the moms and dads of this world, cooperative players, achievement hunters, pro gamers, and so on. I've got here with me Tim Campbell and Kevin Dong now sitting in their right seat. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And thanks for talking about your new game, Stormgate.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We can't wait to show both you and the Grubsters out there what we have in store for you guys.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this a lot. Thank you very much for having us on.
Thanks for coming on. I've watched as many interviews as I could with you guys with other people to get up to date to questions that may have already been asked. But I know many Grubsters may not have seen some of those before, so there might be some repetition, but I also have a lot of other questions.
Let's do it. That sounds perfect.
So one thing, basically the first thing for me that put you guys on the map is that since you announced Frost Giant Studios, you've had practically monthly discussions about really interesting topics around game creation. Can you talk to us a little bit about that process of starting these big topical discussions?
Yeah, it was an interesting situation. When we announced the company, we did so publicly, and we received just incredible support from the community. And we have choices as game developers when you start on projects about how you're going to take them from start to finish, and at what point do you announce, at what point do you talk to the community. And for us, from day one, community involvement has been central to everything that we're doing. This company would not exist, this game would not be in development, we wouldn't be sitting here talking with you if it wasn't for the support of the community. And so being able to engage with the community before our game was announced, it pretty much had to take the form of talking about the genre and dissecting it and figuring out different ways of approaching, just having that communication back and forth. And now that we have announced Stormgate, we're looking to shift the conversation from kind of a genre-wide one to really a conversation about the game that we're building and really trying to continue that community interaction.
Yeah, and to build on what Tim just said, I think at Frost Giant, the community is really at our roots. For example, I was directly hired from the StarCraft community. Our lead UX designer, he did mods of GameHeart, and from that, he was hired onto the StarCraft team. Our esports lead, Trevor, or commonly known as Torch, played in the first GSL before he was hired to Frost Giant as the lead esports guy. So a lot of our roots as a company come from the community, and we really want to give back and make sure that the community is involved with the development of the game and really knows what's going on at any point.
It's been really interesting following those discussions, because I imagine that being able to talk about these things without necessarily having like a game built yet, without being really far in the development process, you can maybe make the game, maybe it's cliche, but it's true, make the game that people want to be playing rather than doing like an early access and then being really far in development and then having difficult questions like, are we going to completely rebuild this system?
Yeah, it's always an interesting kind of line to walk too. Especially when you're talking about stuff early that, like you're saying, decisions are being made. We're actively like in the throes of development where any units that we're building may or may not see the light of day. We're trying ideas out, we're discarding, we're learning from that and improving, and we're right smack in the middle of this work in progress phase. And then to be able to announce and talk with the community in front of that, I'll be honest, like that's a terrifying thing for any developer to do. Developers like to just get the game completely done and then showcase something that's finished, but that's not what we're trying to do with this game. For this game, like Kevin was saying, community interaction is at the core. We're trying to do everything we can to make sure that this game is as good as possible for this community. And so that involves us announcing as early as we have, and that involves us really just trying to continue that conversation and make sure that community feedback is heard and incorporated into development, so the game gets better because of that communication.
That's awesome. And before we go into some of the technical questions, having said that, with how transparent you are, that's sometimes something that some developers feel burned on later because, well, you're saying, let's say you could have a vision, you could make certain guarantees, or maybe you say, this is how we see it right now. And then you put information out there. For instance, if you were to say, which they didn't, we never want to have heroes. And then later you think, oh, heroes would be amazing in the game. But we've already put it out there that we're not doing heroes. Is that something that like you were concerned about at all?
I think at any given point we try to be honest with the community, and we try to b temper expectations. So for example, early on in development, we had a Reddit topic, we had a discussion topic about heroes, and in that Reddit topic, we talked about experimenting with heroes at the end of the topic, and we've continued to do so. Currently, we are still experimenting with heroes, and we have heroes in all our prototypes, in all the game modes. We're just not sure exactly where they'll end up at the end of the development. So I think it's a combination of both being honest, and being transparent, and making sure that, hey, if we decide to back off later on, if we decide to reverse our decisions, we at least have like a reasonable explanation and we can explain the design process at which we arrived at that decision.
Yeah, and I think the benefits from having the conversation and getting feedback outweigh the risks, I think, of overcommitting in a certain direction. Like Kevin's saying, we will always try to be open and honest about where we're at in development. And so our heroes, like we were saying early on, are neither Warcraft heroes nor StarCraft commanders. They're our own thing for this game, and we're still chasing the fun for it, and really determining how they can best impact the game experience. Now, I think we're onto some stuff that's really cool with them. But we also took a lot of feedback from the community about concerns about heroes. And so we've skewed how we're approaching them, what modes they're in, how we're thinking about implementing them, really directly based off of feedback that we heard early on from the community. And so that's the sort of thing that we want to keep up throughout development, so the end game is much better because of it.
Yeah, I heard some of those feedbacks that you guys had on Heroes so far. Let me give you my love letter for Heroes, because some of the negatives of Heroes you've mentioned is like too much death balling. Heroes are needed to protect units. Too much centralized focus. Maybe they kind of break the counter table because Heroes could destroy everything and you no longer need to think about rock, paper, scissors. Snowballing because they gain experience and power over time. What I think has helped Warcraft 3 to remain alive for as long as it has is that the RNG, the heroes, the unique item combinations that you can get over the course of a game, the mix and match you can do with different heroes has created many memorable games where there's a unique story that ties a game together, more so than just the rote repetition of making your StarCraft 2 build order as clean as possible. Let's shave off another second. Let's arrive 1 second earlier. And let's have one more Stalker at this certain timing. With Heroes, there's always this story. So I guess my question is, either via Heroes or via another route, do you think that do you have any ideas about how to create very unique feeling games? Because RNG and Heroes with items do achieve that.
You go first.
Yes. No, I think that's a really good point about it. Those features definitely were core to the feel of Warcraft and a key differentiator between Warcraft and StarCraft. So what we've said before in terms of how close or how far apart our game is going to feel from Warcraft to StarCraft is we look at kind of the gap between Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. And that's about the gap from those games that we're aiming for. So we have some really cool ideas that we haven't shared yet that we're exploring during development, and we'll be rolling more out as we go. But yeah, having the game feel in the family, so to speak, and having the game also feel unique, that's the fine line that we're walking during development. That's, I think, the challenge, but also the opportunity that we're chasing. So yeah, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think like the story built around each individual games, even surrounding heroes, doesn't necessarily have to be surrounding heroes that necessarily level or gain items, for instance. Something that a StarCraft commentator, Rotterdam, has said is that he wishes all the units were named. So he wishes, like, for example, Bob, you could follow Bob the Marine around and you can see he's the first guy that comes out of the barracks and he survives the first engagement. All his buddies have died. And at the end, like, he's still there. He's got like 40 kills, and that's just really, really awesome. So some ideas you can take from there is that if you have like this named unit on the battlefield, that doesn't necessarily have to, it's a special unit. It doesn't necessarily have to level. It doesn't necessarily have to gain items. I think you can kind of create some aspect of that. And the second is where, even though we're currently going in the direction of no leveling on our heroes, we're still considering aspects of perhaps veterancy, which is like kind of unit leveling on maybe like a faction-wide basis rather than throughout the entire game. One way to differentiate a faction from another. Another way in which we feel like we can vary games is through just very varied harassment. So, for example, that harassment in StarCraft came from the aspect of killing workers often. Killing 5 workers nets you a very different outcome, a very different game than killing 8 workers. In our game, what we're trying to do is we're going to try to more take the Warcraft 3 approach, where the harassment is very varied. You can do it through killing workers. You can do it through killing maybe your favorite, Grubby, killing burrows, although maybe not recently with reinforced defenses. Or you can do it in a variety of other ways. There's very varied harassment in that game, and it's not just about killing workers. There's a lot of nuances about, oh, you do this harassment and you force the player to pull workers, and that damages his economy by forcing him to expend resources to repair. That damages his economy by forcing resources that he's not mining with those workers, the opportunity cost of not mining. And we feel like with these little variations, we can make games feel very varied and have each game be their own little story.
That's a great answer. That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of resources, have you settled on any amount yet? 2, 3, 4? Can you tell us any of the resources, what they're named yet?
We don't have a name exactly for the resources, but I can talk about the direction we're heading towards the resources.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're looking in the direction of something closer to both the Warcraft and StarCraft franchises, where there are 2 distinct resources. Maybe not Warcraft 2 where there's oil, but that's another topic. And what we're leaning towards is one resource, which is similar to minerals in StarCraft, where it's less rate limited, and a resource in StarCraft, which is more rate limited, which is like the Vespian tech resource. We like the Vespian resource over the tree resource in Warcraft because it is rate limited. We like the idea that if you scout your opponent has a Colossi at 5 minutes into the game, you know that because you're like a really good player, you know that he can't have double forges, like chrono boosting upgrades at the same time. So that amount of information and that ability for a pro player to differentiate himself by scouting these minute gas timings, we think is really cool. In terms of the primary resource, we have 2 main inspirations. The primary inspiration is from StarCraft 1. I mentioned StarCraft 1 specifically and not StarCraft 2 because in StarCraft 1, each subsequent worker in StarCraft 1 returns a diminishing amount of resources. The first worker you create maybe mines at 100% efficiency, and the second worker you create might mine at 95% efficiency, and so on and so on. We think this does a lot of cool things. Number one, it allows players and it encourages players to expand a lot. With this method of economy, you are able to have 10 workers on 2 bases, and that will net you more income than 10 workers on 1 base. So one of our core gameplay tenets is the idea of territory control. We want players to expand their territory, and we think that's really cool to an RTS and really integral to an RTS because it's kind of balancing the risk and reward of gaining more, whether that be resources or control over like a fountain, for example, and the risk of you have to control these territories, so you're opening yourself up to more avenues of attack. The second benefit of a diminishing returns of resources is that of harassment. In StarCraft 2, because there is not that diminishing return, what ends up happening a lot is if you kill 50% of your opponent's workers, they lose 50% of their income. Whereas if you have diminishing returns, if you kill 50% of their workers, they maybe only lose 33% of their income. So that helps with mitigating the impact of harassment. And you don't necessarily lose your entire economy to a widow mine drop.
Right. Yeah, and it's not as punishing. And speaking of widow mines, I heard your other interview where you said you're looking to drop the lethality and the reaction speed punishment of some of these units that were sometimes less popular in StarCraft 2, like a disruptor shot, a widow mine shot that would wipe out your worker line that was a lot easier to use than to defend against. And I like that trend and direction a lot. Also speaking about the 2 resources, you're thinking of 2 resources right now, I gather. And yeah, lumber is a very simplistic resource in Warcraft 3 because there are so many of it. So if you were able to mine it uncapped, and you can actually build things with it, it could be insane. It would be a completely different game. It's more of like a tech speed limiter is how it works. It matters a lot at the start, and then it doesn't matter at all anymore. So all the resource management is really only about gold. But there is a cool mechanic, which is the upkeep management, which is the comeback mechanic for Warcraft 3 and creates a lot of interesting, truly, really the only macro really in Warcraft 3 that exists. Have you considered upkeep management to keep armies smaller and more agile, more needing to fight? Or do you think you will achieve that via other map objectives? You mentioned area control because of needing to branch out over different bases, but are you also thinking about Solnaga watchtowers, relics, maybe capture points, capture the flag, and so on?
Yeah, there's a lot of things being talked about here. I'll start with the...
Don't forget a single one.
Oh, no, that's a lot of pressure. But with regards to upkeep, that's I can reveal exclusively on the Grubby stream that's something we're experimenting with literally right now in our prototypes. We've done a lot of analysis on upkeep, and I think overall, just within the RTS community, how upkeep is implemented in Warcraft 3 is not very well liked. And I'll say
I love it. What?
There's the stunned expression.
Oh no! This is the wrong stream to reveal this on.
Upkeep is so good, but we should probably have like a post-stream conversation about it, because I'd love to just talk about it without using it for stream or YouTube or anything like that. I love these discussions, but talk to me about upkeep.
All right, so I think in Warcraft, upkeep runs into 2 distinct problems that I can think of off the top of my head. The first is that the negative UI feedback around it is really jarring. You have like this big
you're losing money. Yeah.
And you have like this blaring like sound that comes on, and it's actually, I feel for a player, especially a new player, it's like it's communicating to you that you've made a mistake. Actually, you're like, this is wrong, right?
Well, you could just reverse it and say you're getting bonus money because you have no army. You're getting a little bit less bonus money. You're getting no bonus money.
Yeah, I guess that kind of does happen in the game when you lose some army, you drop under 50 supply, and you get that like no upkeep. I'm like, yeah, I must be doing a good job because I'm losing units. But yeah, that's one thing that I think we're really concerned about is the idea of like, oh, there's this like kind of jarring punishment that doesn't feel so good. And I think the other concerning part is that because of how upkeep works in Warcraft 3 specifically, I think the game revolves a lot around timing pushes at very specific food counts. Like in Human versus Night Elf, for example, you often have like a 70 food push because that's when the human breaks their upkeep. They save X amount of money, they break their upkeep, and they do an exact push at that exact timing. And I feel like because of the upkeep system in particular, it kind of narrows the game down into these very specific reactions from players and very specific game plans of games that end up very similar to each other, and that's something we want to avoid.
I understand. Yeah. I think your reasoning. But I think it is not true at the highest level. Like when you really get into it, I feel like there's a lot of wiggle room to have different timings. And that's okay. We don't have to see it the same way. But I think it is quite complex, and it leads to some pretty cool decision making. Tim, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, we like a lot. This is an active discussion here, by the way. We get lots of debates about upkeep or things along these lines where there's a lot of aspects of the end result that comes out of upkeep that we really do like. But the upkeep system itself was designed to accomplish different goals for Warcraft 3 than we have. I mean, at the time, it was absolutely intended to throttle unit counts. It was Blizzard's first 3D game.
Yeah.
Massive performance challenges, especially with all those interactive trees out on the map and all of the other things that we're dealing with at the time. And yeah, it was intended to absolutely reduce the average unit count over games. And that's not something that we're challenged with at this point. So we're really trying to identify the outcomes from Upkeep that we like, the things that help our gameplay, and then design a system around that as opposed to just aping what Warcraft 3 did.
Yeah, and for some context here, I don't know how much the stream knows about this, but Tim C was the lead campaign designer of the original Warcraft 3. If you buy me some time, let me be right back.
Oh no. I legit have no idea what he's going to do right now. So I'm a little nervous.
A signed autograph from when he was a kid that you gave at some convention.
If so, that'd be a surprise to me. Oh my goodness. He's bringing a poster.
I'm crazy and unpredictable.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're keeping me on my toes for sure.
It is an autograph.
We, at Frostgiant, we take a lot from our roots, and we have all this memorabilia from the StarCraft and Warcraft days. And this is an original Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos development team poster. And Tim,
I see myself a bit.
Tim's name, I don't know if the camera quality is high enough, but...
How much can I buy one for?
Oh my goodness.
How much can I buy one for?
How much is this?
Talk later.
I actually am not sure who this belongs to. It's Gerald. It's Gerald.
Oh my God.
He doesn't have to know. He doesn't.
Gerald, you can totally have it.
Yeah. We'll link you up with Gerald.
Okay, next question. We only have 36 more minutes, but maybe we can do this again sometime. I was interested to hear your discussions around airplay. Like you, Monk, I think air is a little strong. And you were talking about making air weaker against ground. I wondered, quite simply, have you considered other different dimensions? Heroes of Might and Magic brings in subterranean and ground level. StarCraft, air and ground. Warcraft 2, also water. Age of Empires 4, only ground and water. Have you experimented, and are you serious about right now? Only ground, no air? Is that something you would or could consider? And have you considered, and this is a second question, air only being able to attack ground and not air versus air, so you avoid those zero collision spam fest, who has the faster or the more air units, battles that you said also aren't as interesting, and I agree.
Again, a lot of questions wrapped up in there.
Only ground. What do you think about only ground, no air?
Only ground. Okay, so that is a discussion that we've actually had on the team before. Specifically, we take inspiration from the Company of Heroes franchise, where that is a game that essentially only has ground units,
right,
but it uses air call downs. And the where we go with that is we think that's a really interesting type of game, but we feel that is not really true to the Blizzard RTS style. And at our core, our development, our core mantra is like we want to be first and foremost a Blizzard style RTS. So that even though we did actually consider that is not a direction that we're heading down.
So you want to improve air rather than eliminating a dimension. Makes sense.
Exactly.
I think shifting the proportion of power in every player's army from being, especially late game, so predominant towards air and being able to pull that back so it's really focused on land, that gives us, I think, better opportunity to explore different terrain types and their impacts on gameplay, and that's an area that really excites us.
Yeah,
makes sense.
With regards to other terrain types or other like a subterranean or a naval terrain type, I talked about this in a few interviews with regards to naval play. The two aspects of it that I dislike are the idea that number one, it's limiting to map makers. Because like in Age of Empires, you have the scenario where half your maps are land-based and half your maps are water-based, and you have a scenario where you either limit the map makers to you always have to have water on your map, or you force them to create a map that eliminates a third of their possible units that they can build in the game. A second reason why we don't necessarily want to consider naval play is the idea that with naval play, it can often be a trap for players to build naval units or it can be a trap for players to commit to a certain unit type. The example I like to give is if you build too many submarines, you're often like really screwed with the idea of like, oh, they have tanks and I built this unit that I can't engage with these other units with. And there's not really like a unit like that, like let's take, for example, Warcraft 3. Yes, the only unit that can't attack ground, the only air unit that can't attack ground is the Hippogriff. But even the Hippogriff has an opportunity for you to sit an archer on top of it, and that allows you to attack ground, even though that might be not the best air to ground.
It's an outlier on the team too, because I've loved Navy since, I don't know, the giant turtles in Warcraft 2, and tried to pay them an homage with the squids and the dolphins in Red Alert 2. So I've been a fan of naval creatures for a while, and that said, we're not doing Navy at launch. We will be implementing water in the game, and there will be the capability. So either by us or by modders, it could potentially be incorporated at some day in the future. But one of the beautiful things about building a service-based game is that we don't have to have everything in the box day one. We can really build this game, see what's fun, what the community reacts to after launch, and then really skew what we develop and continue to release after that based off the interests. And who knows, maybe one day there will be navies.
Yeah, maybe just like in Warcraft 3, 20 years after the game was released, there is like a naval map in the game.
Yeah, what happened to that one, guys? Like, we had a water map for a bit. I don't know what happened. There was like this pyramid-shaped water. I'll talk to the guys of chat later. I played it for a bit and now it's gone. I don't know. W3 Champions, come on. But yes, like you said, yeah, it can come later. Okay, cool. Cool to know. Let's talk a little bit about the world building. It must be really exciting to branch out and be able to build in a different world, clean slate. You can design the races from the ground up with inspiration, of course, that people find relatable. Is there one person building this story? Is everyone chipping in on the story? Wouldn't it be cool if? Have you considered bringing other people in? Are you thinking of making movies in the game already, writing books with the game lore already? Where are we at?
Yeah, I would say this is kind of the beautiful chaos of building a new IP, is that gameplay and world building both have to happen. And I could see scenarios where it makes total sense to do one cleanly and then the other one chases it, or vice versa. But building a new IP and a game as a small studio, we're doing everything all at once. And so we have a lot of different people involved here. For example, Mickey Nielsen is working a lot on the narrative world building. He is somebody who has had a long history working at Blizzard and writing some best-selling novels, and is just phenomenal at what he does. And he's helping kind of surround what the game team is doing with all of this extra narrative world building. The game team doesn't necessarily have time to figure out, well, if we really want this special type of unit in the game, how can we narratively explain how that came to be 100 years ago? Well, that's where Mickey kind of comes in and interlocks with what the design team is doing and helps to support us. So we try to get the entire team involved with narrative. This is something that's different than I've experienced on other game teams. We have progress made, and then we have these narrative summits where we share all of the world building progress with the team. We get input, we highlight changes that were made by the team's input, and then we carry forward. And this is kind of a microcosm of what we're hoping to do with the community as we start revealing more and more about this game universe and the gameplay that we have, is just continue highlighting where the community has impacted how we've developed it, and then continue just that cycle of feedback.
If you were building a story, and you had to choose between very deep with you plant the seed of a story now that will be actually an Easter egg of something that's revealed in 3 years from now, and people be like, oh my God, we knew what was going to be the next race all along. Or if you just want to focus more on an approachable, easy to identify with story that supports but is not the forefront of the game's purpose, what would you choose? Or just both?
Well, I think that's we aspire definitely to try to, I think, do the first of what you're talking about, which is pre-think out a lot of things, be able to dot breadcrumbs along the way. We've started being able to do that, but of course, as a young dev team, a new studio, right, our ability to do that is somewhat limited, because we don't at the outset know exactly what this game universe is going to be. We're going through twists and turns and dropping things along the way and iterating and coming up with better things. And so our ability to predict where it's going to land and lay perfect breadcrumbs for that it's a little messy. So we try to do that as best we can.
Yeah, I think that the two things you mentioned, it being like breadcrumb with Easter eggs and the idea of being approachable for a new user, aren't. I don't see them as mutually exclusive, especially at the beginning of a development. I think one of our core goals with our setting right now is for it to be approachable. And I think if you just take a look at some of the most popular the most popular pieces of media, like for example, even Star Wars, that was not completely original. It was it was based on a lot of like sci-fi lore that came behind it. So we want players to be able to get into our game, especially at the initial launch of our game where everything is kind of brand new. But over time, we do want there to be these breadcrumbs so that we can reward players who have been with us for a very long time. I think the MCU does that really well in that, yes, a lot of these shows are very independent, but they hide a lot of lore from the previous iterations, from the previous movies that rewards the movie fans that have stuck with them for a very long time.
And on the topic of Easter eggs, I'm a huge fan of them. For Warcraft 3, I worked with other designers, and as a group, we just said, let's try to soak this game with as many Easter eggs or funny lines when you click through them or hidden things you can discover in the levels, as much of that as possible. And that was something that was really fun for us. And I think it really also helped breathe some life into the game, right? Because as we were having fun making it, I think that fun translates through. And I think the people playing the game can ultimately tell that it was made with love and enthusiasm and by a dev team that was enjoying themselves. So that's something that I hope to carry through into our campaign missions and everything that we're doing with the game.
We're sure looking forward to that. Thank you for sharing. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, you guys have mentioned as one of the talking points of this game, and I think it is extremely needed, you want to have a bigger emphasis on a truly social experience. Now, I'm going to set the stage here with a couple of examples, personal experience, won't take long. SE1, you drop into the chat room. The first time I showed SE1 to my niece who lives in US, I went to visit there, newly introduced game, I'm like, it's awesome. There were insults about family members immediately because it's a public general chat room, unmoderated. Warcraft 3 was similar, and yet many of us look back fondly of those times and those chat rooms. Then you've got Battle.net 0.2, where it was called 2.0 officially, but socially there was so little going on that a nickname that I use sometimes, but suddenly the social aspect was almost gone. In order to prevent liability maybe to the company, not having to moderate things, social was locked away behind several clicks. You've mentioned wanting to be more social. Are you considering like big general chat rooms? Are you considering mimicking more the experience of Twitch chat or Discord, which has uncapped user count in a single room? And are you considering giving good moderation tools? Because look, my Twitch chat, they're awesome. And there are bad eggs, but because you get rid of them, the cool people feel like they can still have a place to chat. The reason that SE1 chat didn't work on some level, not safe for work, is because there was almost no moderation. But in the Warcraft 3 clan channels, there was moderation, and that kind of worked out. And I think many of us do miss those times where you had a cool hangout place where all the pros are, or the sub-pros. How are you envisioning that for Stormgate right now?
I think that feel of what you're talking about is absolutely what we're going for. I think the exact implementation is something that we're still figuring out the right mix. Obviously, Warcraft 3 came out in a time where there wasn't Discord and there wasn't Twitch, and how do you encapsulate that sort of feel in today's age and keep it modern or relevant? That's really what we're trying to figure out right now. I think in terms of the game experience itself, we're definitely looking at skewing in terms of modes and in terms of feature set. We're really trying to skew in terms of things in ways where players will have more opportunities to interact with each other or to see the players around them. We're already working on replays and spectating and elements of the game too that we think will play into this as well. So I think this is an area that we'd also love to hear from the community on. I think that's the whole point of announcing as early as we have, so that we can really talk about specific topics, find out what would be appreciated by the community the most, and be able to factor that into our plans.
Yeah, I think with respect to StarCraft 2 especially, I think one of the things that we're keen to improve on is like you said, the initial launch of Battle.net 2.0, where it was one of the most active times for StarCraft 2 ever. But at the same time, it felt like a very lonely game. You couldn't really see anyone else was actually in the game or in the client or even communicating. So we want to make sure that you do see, oh, other people are here. There's other people to play with you. That being said, I think every few years, the climate around chat really develops. And right now, I think we're, at least in the Western scene, we're in the era of Discord. And you have a lot of these Discord channels where people hang out there. It's been such a long time, and I don't know if this is because of how StarCraft 2 works or its chat functionality, but it's been such a long time since I've actually met someone in StarCraft chat.
Yeah.
It's a lot mostly through, and this is the same for Warcraft as well. It's mostly through other Discord channels where I've met people like the Warcraft 3 gym, for example, and I've met new friends to play these games with. So that's something we're heavily considering, and we want to see like what is necessary in our game and what will most help people. And one of the answers might be Discord integration rather than something that is like strictly built for chat.
Interesting. Very interesting. Good luck with working that out. I hope we can bring the social back in gaming, because I love gaming the most when it is a shared experience with others. There was a good question from my community, which was about multiplayer servers. As you may know, Brazil has an amazingly big and passionate fan base regarding Warcraft 3. But by Blizzard, they've almost always been ignored in terms of server support. Similarly for Australia or Singapore or New Zealand, we had 4 central servers in Blizzard Warcraft 3 servers and SC1, but W3 Champions has secured dozens of servers to create a truly global multiplayer ping experience. It doesn't seem difficult, yet Blizzard never did. Are you looking to do, and I guess, are you looking to do a global matchmaking? Is question 1, and 2, will you also think of some of the more, to us, remote regions like Brazil and South America?
Well, one thing we are doing constantly is we are actually in constant talks with the Warcraft 3 Champions team.
Oh.
I myself am not an expert on global networking, but a lot of them are. So we're getting constant feedback from them, and we're sharing a lot of notes throughout. With regards to global matchmaking, we don't have any plans yet around that we can announce. But that's something that I think we are indeed looking into, and something that I think we're probably at the very launch going to be moving towards direction of what StarCraft 2 is doing, where you are more matched with people within your own individual servers for more catered and low latency experience.
I see. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. And we'll hear more about that later then, whenever you're ready to share. Question about how much of the game's pacing and flow is designed within mind, whether a person that's playing it still has brain cells for other things. For instance, SC2 is really hard to stream for me because there's no brain cells left to talk. And Warcraft 3 is a little easier. It still gets pretty intense, but I can talk a little bit, like, flaming your allies in 4-on-4 under your breath. And in Heroes of the Storm, it's a lot easier just because it's a little bit less intense. There's a little bit more calm moments, and that's so easy to stream. Would you ever, have you come at points in your discussion where you think, we can make the game super try-hard, hardcore at the highest level, but we also want to make sure that this is a healthy streamscape for future content creators, for instance? No self-interest in this question at all.
So what I would say there is we're looking towards both ends of the spectrum. One of our main tenets is with regards to gameplay is we are trying to lower the skill floor without necessarily lower the skill ceiling. And what that means is we're going to try to make it so that if you're a complete newbie, you may be able to perform at, let's say, 50% of the capability of like an absolute pro player. So I would say that we are trying to hit levels where if you're absolutely tryharding, you're gonna have the opportunity to kind of like multitask at the level of let's say a StarCraft 1 or a StarCraft 2. But if you are if you want to communicate with chat, if you want to engage with them, and you maybe are only using like 80% of your brain cells, you will be able to get to a place where you will perform better than in those games.
I see. Interesting.
You mentioned lethality earlier, and that's something that we're absolutely looking at as we iterate on the game pacing. But generally speaking, we're looking to extend the time to kill, so it takes a little bit longer for units to die. That creates some space where we think that there's some good skill expression that we can squeeze out of buffs, debuffs, heals, reactionary play, and that also, I think, I think that opens up the door for somebody who is maybe newer and plays less optimally to just enjoy, because they're probably not going to be filling up that extra space and pacing with all of those extra, buffs and debuffs and whatnot that they're doing. So they would probably actually feel a little bit easier pacing from their perspective. But as you go up kind of the skill ladder, you would find ways to squeeze more and more efficiency out of that time to pacing.
Yeah, and with respect to your question specifically, a good example is in StarCraft 2. If you're not paying attention and a disruptor comes from off the screen to hit you, you're going to lose like 20 Marines maybe, right? But with lower lethality, what happens is you maybe lose a third or half of your HP, and then you are still given some time to react. And even though you've lost like a third or half your HP, that's still significant. You are able to kind of retreat and make decisions around that particular instance.
I think that's a very healthy way to look at it and to design a game in. So that sounds great. I wanted to ask something kind of out of left field. Have you considered at all unit? We know about the mothership core and that you don't think it's like necessarily an amazing how it worked in the game in StarCraft, and that you're thinking about heroes. And that's a one unit cap essentially. You've got a unit, the cap is one. That's a hero type of unit. Have you thought about other arbitrary amounts of unit cap? For instance, you can only have 20 Marines, you can only have 3 carriers, or whatever units you're going to be having in Stormgate.
Yeah, one thing we've learned a lot about RTS development from the development of StarCraft 2 co-op commanders. I'm not sure how much you've engaged with those, but in some ways they are sub-factions of the core StarCraft races. But in some other ways, they're actually completely new RTS races.
Yes, I've played them.
Yeah, so one of the coolest and most well-received co-op commanders is Nova. And what Nova's thing is that she can instantly call down her units, but let's forget about that. But she basically has unit chargers instead of production. So every 60 seconds, you get a charge of Marines and you get a charge of Marauders, for instance. So in that way, it's not necessarily limited to a certain number, but every 60 seconds, for example, you can only make 1 Marine and 1 Marauder and 1, let's say, Siege Tank, for instance. And this encourages a lot of diversification and encourages players to not mass a specific type of unit. People really love playing in this playstyle, and we're taking a lot of inspiration from something like that. I think it achieves a lot of the same goals as what you're describing with the hard unit caps that are not hero specific. And that's all I have to say about that.
That's enough. Next question. How do you intend to make losing fun? Winning is, for most people, almost always fun.
Mm-hmm. With regards to having fun while losing, we want to make it so that the game is not necessarily all about winning or losing a particular match. One way we can do that is with more well-thought progression. In Warcraft 3, there wasn't really any out-of-game progression, and in StarCraft 2, it was kind of infamously limited to level 60, and you didn't really get many cool rewards around that. So first of all, number one, we want to make it so that even though you lose, you get some out-of-game experience, and you are earning something towards that with every game that you play. Second of all, we want to be able to allow you to track additional stats. In StarCraft 2, you're only able to see, hey, my APM was on average higher, my time supply box was on average higher. And we want to expand on that and allow you to see, these are the ways I've improved, these are the ways I could do better in the next game, such that every game is not necessarily about the outcome, but about the improvement involved there.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think the 2 ways that Kevin highlighted are important. I think the typical way to go is to just provide some sort of reward or partial reward. Either it's XP or it's currency or it's some reward, even with losing. And we'll be doing some of that as well too. I think that's important to feel like you're always chipping away at progress, and the time isn't wasted. But the second part, I think, is the thing that we want to highlight. Is we're not just making Stormgate be a game that's easy for new players to come into and learn to play RTS, but we want it to be a game that is set up to help people move from good to great and move up that skill ladder. And so I think as long as we can share a lot more stats, a lot more information about how your performance maybe differed from the previous games that you've played, highlight, like Kevin was saying, areas of improvement, and maybe flag areas for you to put particular effort in next time, then we can help players along the way, and then it feels less painful as just a one-off loss, and it feels more like another rung on the ladder that you're going through, whether it's a win or a loss.
Yeah. RTS is not necessarily about the destination, Grubby. It's sometimes about the journey and the friends you make along the way.
Amen. And that is why we love RTS. Not Gordy. And I wanted to ask you something about the activities you can do inside a game, besides resource expanding. So in StarCraft 2, sometimes famously, you can kind of be out of hobbies. If you've already kind of occupied all the bases, you can have a stalemate scenario where defender's advantage is greater than attacker's advantage. In Heroes of the Storm, on busy big maps, you pretty much have always got something to do, and more importantly, there are comeback mechanics by being in places that people don't expect, or catching opponents on some of these hobby locations, like mercenary camps or watchtowers. And in Warcraft 3, there's also almost always hobbies to do, because whether you're winning or losing in the direct confrontation, the map size, upkeep management, then there are creeps in many, many different places, and it's really only when the creeps run out that there may not be much to do. And on bases, on maps where there's only one expansion for both, and not many creeps, those tend to be the stalemates. What kind of hobbies, additional activities besides, winning, straight up, killing your opponent, what are you considering? Are you considering capture points in traditional one-on-one competitive RTS play?
So with regards to capture points specifically, I know you've probably watched a lot of interviews.
Yes.
To summarize this, we're looking into separate win objectives in our core 1v1 mode and our looser 3v3 mode, which we expect will have more objective-based play. Mm-hmm. One thing that we're considering for all modes, like you kind of alluded to, is the idea of creeps, which is like a kind of a mini objective. Our analysis of creeps in Warcraft 3 is that, yes, they are these what you call little things you can do across the map, but you also recognize a negative of them in that once you run out of creeps, the map kind of becomes a turtle fest, right? Once you run out of creeps, the objectives no longer exist, and you're just kind of camping on your own bases. And on Echo Isle, sometimes you just camp to 100 and smash at each other, right?
You mentioned the most guilty map of this mechanic. Yes, that's true. You're aware.
But so one of our ideas we want to experiment, we're experimenting with right now is the idea of respawnable creeps. These kind of mini objectives that always give you incentive to go out into the middle of the map, to go out and engage with your opponent. This encourages players to get out on the map and kind of fight over these little territory points in order to have like small victories, even though you might be losing.
What will creeps do when they don't give experience or items?
Yeah. So if you think about some of the things, for example, that creeps do in Warcraft 3, besides giving XP or items, they give gold, right? They give resources. Some of them drop cool runes, like there's synergy drops like a rune of speed, right?
There's like watch reward, healing ward, and of course, when you clear a creep, you gain access to an area or a doodad that you may be able to interact with.
Exactly. So we're taking a lot of inspiration from some of those things, and especially in the 3v3 mode, we want to experiment with like new types of things that creeps can drop that benefit the entire team.
Okay, very interesting. Population cap, 100, 200, 400, variable per race.
Yeah, that's one that we're still iterating on and probably will be for a while. Right now, we're targeting 200, but we're experimenting with different unit densities for the different factions. We really like the idea of having the factions be even more asymmetrically different than they were in Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2. So we're trying to push beyond that. And so even with a consistent unit cap, we can make one of the factions play in a way that's totally different than another by emphasizing fewer units, whereas another one may have much more numerous units just by having cheaper population costs for them. And so we're experimenting with that right now. We'll see if that's something we stick with, but that's at least where our heads are at currently.
Okay. And in terms of resources, in Age of Empires 4, there are infinitely renewable resources to a large factor for gold and food. Wood is virtually limitless on most maps, and even stone has a small infinitely renewable resource mechanic. It reminds of StarCraft 1's Vespene gas that never truly runs out, though runs on a very small fire. What is your perspective on infinite resources? Are you planning any of them, or do you want resources to become scarce in the late game?
We don't have strong thoughts around the renewable resources in the late game, although we are leaning towards the idea of something closer to that of StarCraft 2, where you do run out of resources early on, which encourages you to expand. One thing I can share with you from our prototypes is that we kind of went too far in the opposite direction in one of our playtests. And what kind of happened is that one team, there was like a huge fight, and both sides lost their entire armies, but one side had more expansions than the others, and their mains ran out, or their naturals ran out. And it felt really bad for one team to be able to remax and the other team to not be able to remax. But the team that was like way more powerful didn't realize what was happening. And so they just like kind of played it out in like a regular game. So we're really careful about not making like this situation where even though the battle was really impactful, you're still not able to come back into the game because resources ran out too early and you feel like too much of an incentive to constantly expand over the map.
Well, you mentioned Age of Empires also. One of the things that I really like about the resources is how they treat food. There's multiple mechanisms for getting food. Different civilizations can have different advantages. They different types of food gathering kick in at different points in the game. There's a lot of really interesting design subtleties around that resource. And so as we are iterating with our resources, that's the sort of idea that we kick around, we talk, and we see if we can incorporate things along those lines into our model and have that wind up being really, I think, just an additive to the experience in a way that hopefully opens up interesting new tactics.
Yeah, you mentioned, we talked about resources before, and I think in terms of asymmetry of gathering resources, you kind of have on one end of the spectrum, you can have the StarCraft franchise, and the other end, you have like the Age of Empire franchise. I think Warcraft 3 kind of lands somewhere like in the happy middle where like there is that asymmetry, but there's only 2 resources and there's more limited asymmetry. I think where we're looking to eventually end up is something somewhere between Warcraft 3 and maybe Age of Empires, but maybe closer to Warcraft 3. What we've learned recently, or what we learned in development just overall, is the idea that, asymmetries on paper, I think sound really fun, but I think there is a point at which you overwhelm players with asymmetry. For example, if like you introduce them to the human race, right? And then you have them fight against the Protoss race, and the Protoss race works completely differently from the human race. It can be very difficult to understand, hey, this is how my faction works. What is that other faction doing? Like, it just like works on completely different mechanics, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of fun ideas to explore there too that I don't think we have the final recipe in hand yet, but that we're really trying to push towards just fun ideas and interesting mechanics. There was a brief anecdote. I know we need to move on to other topics, but there was a brief time in Warcraft 3's development where the Mountain King's ultimate was to actually create a gold mine. Okay. That did not last long during development. That quickly moved out for various reasons. But that was a fun attempt to try to work in another twist to economy by allowing a hero to be able to actually extend and magnify their resource gathering. And so we're really trying to not do that exactly, but we're really trying to lean into new ideas that we can do within this sort of framework of 2 resources and 200 supply cap, and still explore new design space.
Is that going to be added to Grubby Craft?
I was just going to say, we'll be your guinea pig, and you can see if you like it. Can we do this, guys? I know there's a lot of community figures here watching. That puts a real new spin on human fast expansion. It could really help Mountain King first. Thank you for the idea.
Yeah, especially back in the Reign of Chaos days, you could creep to level 6 and make a gold mine, right?
Could you?
You You could. I remember there's a creep route. You could creep on Plunder Isles as a Dreadlord, creep to level 6 without like the EXP.
Sure, yeah.
Just rush Infernal.
Yeah.
And kill your opponent.
Oh yeah. No, I thought you said make a gold mine.
Right. Well, with the mount, you rush level 6 on a Mountain King, and you make a gold mine with his ultimate.
Oh, it was his ultimate. I thought it was a basic ability.
It was replaced by Avatar.
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember now. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you could have done that in Reign of Chaos. That'd be sick. I know we only have you guys for 3 more minutes. That I'm sure there's plenty to discuss next time. I have a lot of unanswered questions, but you've given us so much so far, and maybe we can do this again sometime when maybe you have some gameplay to show. I'd love to see it next time as well. Just let us know anytime. And but I have one more question. Are you thinking about a second game yet after Stormgate?
Absolutely not. We're not even thinking about a second platform. We are, and I know it's just to be clear. Like we're a small company. We are 100% focused on Stormgate and Stormgate PC specifically. This is what the company's here to make, and that's what we're focused on.
Okay. Fair enough. For a later date. I saw Kevin almost having a stress attack. Thank you guys both so much for joining our community of Grubsters here and sharing some of your dreams and visions and plans and work on Stormgate. We've learned much, and we'll continue to look forward to more news that you guys will be releasing, more exciting news about Stormgate. It's your final word. Any final shout-outs before you get back to it?
I'll say something quick and then I'll let Kevin do it. But we're here because of the community. We're here because of you guys. This company literally would not exist if it weren't for the enthusiasm and loyalty of the RTS community. And so I just want to say thank you. We are huge fans ourselves of both Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, and we're really just focused on doing honors to that legacy and making you guys proud. So I can't wait to be rolling out more about our game, sharing more with you, and please do engage positive, negative feedback. This is why we've announced. We want to hear from you guys about any part of this game that you would like to engage with us about. So please do let us know what you think.
And yeah, Grubby, it's just been so great to be on your stream. I remember back in the day when I was just a simple US East host for EU to China.
Thank you.
Now I've achieved my dream of getting on the Grubby stream. So this is really the dream come true moment for me.
I'm sure.
Thank you all for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hey, have a great day. Have a great rest of your day, and see you next time maybe.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Tim and Kevin, thank you. Bye-bye. Cool stuff. I had a lot more questions, but I was trying to aim for the things that maybe other interviews hadn't dealt with yet. And maybe we'll do again the next time. Really promising start. Yeah, I think sometimes game companies can be these inscrutable, distant entities that do their own thing, and you think you want something, but really you don't. And while we don't know exactly how the game is going to be looking like, Stormgate, it is at least good to know that it is a fresh beginning with passionate, enthusiastic people that study all the games that we know and love, between Warcraft 3, SC1, SC2, Age of Empires, and more, Company of Heroes and whatnot, and that they are aware of the same things we're aware of. Just really advanced stuff. They know Echo Isles is a turtle fest. They know it's not fun to get your bio bowl in StarCraft blown up by a disruptor shot. And while some things that are fun for one player are automatically not fun for the other, for instance, if I kill all your workers, that's fun for me, but not very fun for you. So in a way, it can be yin-yang. One player is happy with a victory and another player is unhappy with their loss. But the key sometimes is to make a loss as fun as possible. In Heroes of the Storm, sometimes when you lose, you still feel like you did well. It's your teammates dragged you down, and you did how much hero damage. Those post-game stats that they were talking about. Or maybe you killed a bunch of forts, or you enjoyed your hero because he had a sense of humor, the voice lines, he had some cool blow-ups. In Warcraft 3, I could lose,
but I had 4 rings of protection on my Blade Master. That's funny. You know, that's still something memorable. In SC2, losing usually isn't that fun. Kind of its biggest downside. Winning is fun. I mean, I love SC2. I've done a lot of soul searching with that game, and you aim for improvement and making your timings better and whatnot. But usually losing doesn't feel as good as in some other games. You know, take a platform game, for instance, where you have to jump from place to place. Sometimes they're very punitive, and if you fall once, you miss a jump, you go all the way back down to the start. Those games are torture. I don't know why people play those games. It's not very fun to reset your entire progress because of one mistake. And yeah, I hope it's going to be as opposite as that as possible. The diminishing returns on mining, I love that. When you look at StarCraft 1, StarCraft 1's economy and pacing and army scaling, I feel feels a lot better than StarCraft 2. I think StarCraft 2 is a great game, but SC1 is iconic. And the pacing in StarCraft 1 feels better. So I do like that they're looking at that as well and saying, like, what's magical, what was special about the... what was so special about StarCraft 1 and the pacing, and that they're trying to recreate that. You know, whether they succeed, we will see. But we've got a game to look at. And we'll judge them by the results as much as we'll judge them by the words. But it's good to know that they have a lot of insight and open-mindedness behind the scenes, and that they're listening to us. Excellent questions about game philosophy related to the balance between Deathball versus split tactics as well as economy. Yeah, and it turns out they are looking to kind of create a gamescape like SC1 where you're forced onto the map and to go into different economy locations and whatnot. Any Day of the Tentacle. I was kind of low after the trailer, but this and the Back to Warcraft interview brought me right back up. Great job for all involved. Yeah, and it doesn't mean you should be blindly optimistic, but I think it's a great, healthy attitude to have a game on your radar, to be interested, to understand how the process behind it goes, to give it a chance, right? That's how I'm going into it. I'm excited about it, but not like blindly so. There are many different games out there that we could play. We play the games we play because they're replayable and iconic and fun. Very replayable, right? And I hope Stormgate's going to be one of those. And if so, definitely I'll be playing it as well. Have they talked about unit pathing? Yeah, not in this interview because I'm trying to avoid wasting time on things that I already knew, even if you guys may not know it yet. For unit pathing, they said, you know, obviously the game engine is a lot more intelligent than in Warcraft 3. SC2 already kind of set the standard, even though it's a 12-year-old game by now. Unit pathing in StarCraft 2 is very intelligent. Body blocks are still possible, but for the most part in SC2, it's a simple binary difference between whether you are faster or slower. Zerglings get to surround Zealots almost instantly just by overtaking them, doing an A move, and they'll automatically surround. This is neither very skillful nor interesting to watch, nor does the Protoss player have any counterplay against getting their Zealots surrounded by a bunch of 3 times as fast Zerglings. In Warcraft 3, the game pathing is so simplistic on the skeletons level that the moment you understand it, then you understand how you can do really extensive body blocks. Actually, I wanted to show you guys a perfect example of body blocks that kind of shows what I'm talking about. I was hoping to show this to the devs as well, but really I didn't have time for it. If you take a look here, this is me using the grunt. I'm actually going to slow this down just by a half speed. This is me using a grunt, trying to kill the hurt footman with this grunt. So the way that pathing in Warcraft 3 works, if the grunt is standing here and the footman is here, and the footman is given one movement command to the right side of the screen, he will actually do a shift move command. So the game plots shift Q move commands by itself when you give a singular command. So it could be something as simple as walk here, then walk here, right? And once it chooses a direction, for instance, walk here, or maybe even walk here, right? Whatever it chooses. Some people know this perfectly. Then when you put your grunt in that direction, then the footman can't get past. And because the grunt keeps moving on the right side, the footman may recalibrate that the path now indeed is direct. So I keep using the grunt
What
to...
is the meaning of body block?
I keep blocking the footy, but at the same time, this footy is blocking my Blade Master to not get to the footy. So we end up being each other's match in micro until I fail and he gets past. These kind of fun little micro moments are much of what makes Warcraft 3's micro quite magical and interesting, and what is entirely lost in StarCraft 2, which is why micro is less good to watch, basically, and it feels less good. It sounds like they wanted more SC2 pathing, perhaps even smoother. Yeah, obviously their engine is going to be able... They're making it in UE5, Unreal Engine 5. It's going to be able to do like really good unit pathing. And they still said they wanted body blocks though, right? They want to be able to allow body blocks. So the engine will be smart, and then there will have to be something dumb about it or something smart about body block in order to allow that. And supposedly they want surrounds being possible as well. What do you think about the idea that a game has creeps, but when you kill them, they respawn with bigger level and difficulty to kill them over time? I think that makes a lot of sense, Gosu Bloody. For instance, in Heroes of the Storm, the keep and the core starts with a certain health count, and then after a certain moment in the game, which is one singular moment in time in the game, they scale up to have more health, and that happens once. But mercenaries and bosses, creep counts, they get stronger every minute. Objectives deal more damage every minute. That's the kind of scaling that HOTS has, that Warcraft 3 and SC2 do not have. You're asking if the creeps should scale up, and essentially that's already happening in any ARPG, right? The minions of hell grow stronger when another player enters. When you go to hell, there are stronger creeps. When you're higher level, sometimes in some games, when you're higher level, automatically the creeps are stronger as well, which I have one problem with, but yeah, they could do that. They could do that, right, in Stormgate. Do you think Warcraft 3 Micro is objectively better? Yes, I believe Warcraft 3 Micro is objectively better than SC2. I don't think Dragoons bugging out on a cliff is the epitome of Micro in Brood War, but I do think that in SC2 the game pace is too high, the lethality is too high, and the units are too smart to allow many meaningful repositionings in the game. And there is, of course, the Marine that can kill everything with good micro. You can dodge lurker attacks, baneling attacks, and so on. But it's the kind of sweaty, try-hard micro that really only 100 people in the world can do. And it is good to watch, but I still don't feel like it is as interesting as the landscape, the storyscape of a Warcraft 3 battle when I look at the history of Warcraft 3. Yes, there are going to be heroes, they think. Everything is subject to change, but they're thinking there's going to be heroes that do not level and do not find items, that are more in the strength of the Mongol Khan in AoE 4 and the Mothership Core, though not specifically like the Mothership Core, because they think that that unit was a bit too powerful and impactful and drew too much attention and focus towards itself with its power level. But yeah, some kind of heroes. What about having SC2 pathfinding for interactions between your own units, but not with enemy units? That sounds like a pretty cool and smart idea as well, Technomage. And when we truly go into the game mechanics and how units behave under the hood, there will be so many questions to be answered over time, so much playtesting that Frostgiant will need to do with their own game Stormgate internally, and then once you open it up to the public, when they think it's perfect for showing, the community is going to probably poke holes in many of the things that they thought are working properly, and it's going to turn out to seem broken. So for instance, in Age of Empires 4, I mean, this is just what happens. When you open something up to millions after testing it with hundreds, those millions are going to find a million bugs in 1 second of the game being open, and that's just how it is. And then the question will be, how quickly can they iterate on that and fix it and bug fix and so on? That's where you will see the talent of the programming team behind the team as well, and I think they're up to the task, but it will remain to be seen. So for instance, with Age of Empires 4, there are many strange interactions under the hood for the engine that do become problems over time when we look at how the game plays out. For instance, when I make a wall in Warcraft 2 over coax cable against my brother in 1998, that wall immediately appears on the minimap. and my brother can see where I made walls. You could only make walls in multiplayer because the AI was not able to actually counter walls. So they just didn't allow you to make Warcraft 2 walls at all in single player. But again, in multiplayer you could, because humans know how to kill walls. But they showed up in the Fog of War. In Age of Empires 4, they also show up in the Fog of War. And so you would look on the minimap, you wouldn't see the wall, but you would see the black shadow of the wall. So anytime you look at the minimap, if some enemy made a wall there, you could see it immediately. This is like a form of unintentional, legitimate map hacking. It's an exploit, right? But you don't even have to do anything for it. Then Relic removed the ability to see walls through the Fog of War. But if you take a villager and you start a build wall command and you're looking to paint a wall somewhere, then it shows existing walls again from your opponent. So you've recaptured the exploit of seeing through the Fog of War and seeing your opponent's walls. And I do this like in Age of Empires 4. I'm like, does he have a wall there? Build wall, look, oh yeah, there's a wall there already. And like, that is a mechanic, and the reason I started doing it is because it's been 9 months since release. It must be a feature then, you know? So some of these things. What about like when your opponent walled off one half of the map, your unit knows it. You don't know it, there's a Fog of War, but your unit knows it. So when I say, let's say that this Warcraft 3 frame is actually a lake, and my daily goal, my sub goal, is covering the left side, and my unit is here, and I want to go to my name Grubby in the top left. I'm like, go there, and I'm expecting him to go like this, right? But no, he's going like that. Now I know the daily goal is blocking the left side. I know he made a wall there. So there need to be certain intentional dumbness of the Pathfinder to make a good game that isn't exploitable, to not have unintentional map hacks, and that takes a lot of building of a game. Yes, they are thinking of heroes in one-on-one right now. And I saw your question, Neo. Can someone explain what the Khan does in Age of Empires 4? Basically, what the Khan is, it's a unit that you start with in the start of a game, and it can give 3 different boosts per tier that you have unlocked. You start with one. When you level up to tier 2, then he has another. And when you go to tier 3, you have another one. Either you give movement speed or armor or attack speed to the army that is directly around him. He also has a small attack himself, and he's fairly tanky, and he can scout well. So that's the kind of hero that they have. And he respawns in 2 minutes if he dies. So he always keeps coming back. And that's a unique asymmetry in Age of Empires 4, and that's the kind of hero that they are thinking kind of works well, and that they may want to have some like that in their game as well. It sounds like terrain types and zone control will be a factor in their game, which sounds very interesting. Yeah, you always need hobbies on the map. Otherwise, it gets boring when you're behind, because then you're just waiting to lose. And if you're in a stalemate, nobody wants to attack because of defender's advantage. So you definitely need things out there. Age of Empires 4 tries to fix this by having relics up for the taking, but there's a finite amount of relics. The moment you've picked all the relics, then relics stop to really be a factor. Sacred sites are a more interesting zone control aspect of Age of Empires 4, not without its weaknesses and mistakes in the current iteration, but it is a very healthy secondary bonus and an important area to control, as well as a different win condition that I think is really interesting. They've mentioned that they're not just thinking about elimination as the only win condition, but some other kinds, and I'm looking forward to see what they come up with. What do you think about keybinds and keyboard tricks artificially increasing the skill gap in RTS? For example, SC2 warping in gateway units, you can keybind, click, keybind, click, keybind, click, summon 3 units, or you can hold down the warp in key and just scroll across. Yeah, they actually went in depth with that in some other interview as well, Caximus Gaming. So creep tumor spread in StarCraft 2 is what they call busy work. It used to be kind of an interesting throttle of your attention. Either you spread creep or you don't. But those keybinds became so good that now you can just click one creep tumor, double click it, all your creep tumors are selected, and then you just hold the button and you just paint the map, and boom, you've placed 12 tumors. It has become easier because players are better and control key understanding has become better. Hotkey understanding has become better. Therefore, now it's just busy work, not even interesting. Everyone spreads creeps, and you do it with regularity, and you do it fast, and Zerg just has creep. And by the way, I think creep is a bad mechanic in StarCraft. The vision and movement speed it gives, it's too much, man, and you can't build on it. I think that's, I don't think it's a good mechanic the way that it turned out. And I don't think mules are a good mechanic too in SC2, because you could starve a Terran of resources. They lose 3 bases, they never got a new one. The moment they get to a new base, they can use 800 energy of stored energy and plant 24 mules in that base, and suddenly they're mining with a 6 base economy from a single base. That doesn't feel good. But I mean, every RTS has its flaws. It also doesn't feel fantastic in Age of Empires 4 when you have 5 relics and some of them are boosted via the Recknitz Cathedral, and you never need to gather gold again. Or how Rus was for a while. You could go a whole game without ever gathering gold because you had 5 relics, 3 sacred sites, and 6 hunting cabins to generate gold passively non-stop. So yeah, I think resource scarcity is important. Warcraft 3's lumber is not super interesting. Like I said, it's a technical limiter of your tech speed. For a while it's very scarce, and then it doesn't matter at all anymore. But gold management in Warcraft 3 is quite interesting. Though I found out today that Upkeep was there just to throttle FPS stress. From Tim Campbell. Upkeep is there to throttle too many units on screen because they were afraid our PCs can't handle it. And I think, yeah, F. Ouch. But it's such a good mechanic though, I love it. And I really, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I really don't think it's a negative that the game tells you you're now in Upkeep. It's not like it's saying you're having to pay taxes. It's Upkeep, it's not tax. No one likes that word, right? But the thing is, you really just can't say you're getting bonus money because you don't have army yet. You're getting a little bit less bonus money because you're in low upkeep. You're getting no bonus money, you're in high upkeep. I don't think you need to be too afraid of that psychological effect. I saw the interview from Frostshine with Loco and Back to Warcraft. Are there others? Yep, there's a Winter one, Fear Dragon. I think there's more. Mr. Lama, UGC. He's not UGC, he's ARPG. To be fair, I remember when I was a beginner, I just did the campaign. Upkeep alerts felt confusing and not good. Well, that's really valuable feedback. I don't remember what it's like to be a beginner in Warcraft 3, but of course that is a very current and important question for them, because we all benefit from more casual player feel good, basically. I know one question that people are going to ask me for sure is going to be, can you be good in this game with lower APM? What's their aim to make social RTS? Well, it is both nice for us when we can meet people via the game and to play together with. And it is good for them because social relations within the game enhance player retention. And they've spent much time thinking about onboarding. Onboarding is the term of how an experienced player brings in one of their friends to try out the game. I have tried to... so, for instance, Cassandra's my wife, we both discovered StarCraft 1 by ourselves, and we discovered Warcraft 3 by ourselves. But we discovered it via friends. I mean, separate from each other. Friends brought us into the game, right? And when you start playing, how that experience goes is very important for whether you will stick with the game or whether you will understand the game. So if they build good tools to teach someone the game, and I heard that they said not only will there be a 1-on-1 and a 3-on-3, but they also want to come out with a special game mode where a fast snowboarder can snowboard alongside a slow snowboarder. I'm using a metaphor that is personal to me, but an experienced player can have a meaningful game experience playing with an inexperienced player, and they can learn the game together like that. They can help the lesser player learn the game like that. That's essentially what Cho'Gall is in Heroes of the Storm. Cho walks, it's a two-headed ogre. Player 1 walks and does abilities. Player 2 only abilities, no walking. So they don't need to think about where to walk. That takes away one dimension of the game that makes it a lot easier. And then they added a thing where only one player needs to own the hero to play it together. So that's really smart. And now you can bring in a player that has never played Hats, put them on Gaul, and the two of you can romp around the Nexus together, punching things, which is pretty cool. And if they're gonna come up with an equivalent of the RTS version for their game, that could be really successful. Did you ask them about custom games at all? I did not, because I already got info from other interviews. So they want to make available a map editor for people, and the first maps they're going to make for the game are going to be by Frost Giant themselves, but they're open to community maps, maybe making their way eventually into the latter. But that'll be like for a future season. I did want to ask them if you need a programming degree in order to make maps, or if it's going to be something everyone can do, like in Warcraft 2, but I didn't get around to it. Last time I tried to onboard my friends into Warcraft 3, it was during Reforged. It was so buggy, I personally felt humiliated, lol. Of course they didn't come back. Yep. What's their monetization scheme? They said sell the game once, and then sell future content. Think, for instance, new campaigns and new 3VE content. 3VE being 3 players playing against mission content. And I believe maybe aesthetics. They said it'll never be pay to win and never, what do you call it? The crypto thing, NFTs. Oh, sorry, it's free to play. No, never mind. I'm confusing it with other things. It's free to play. They will sell future content. Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, they're gonna sell it once for $0. You can buy Heroes of the Storm for free right now as well. Yeah, free to play, sell future single or PvE content, and maybe aesthetics. Yeah, free to play, which has its own drawbacks as well, like smurfing, but it does make it more accessible. How would you design levelless and itemless heroes to be fun if you were in charge? I don't know. I think I would give leveling. I love leveling heroes. Yeah, I do. I love leveling heroes. I think it makes games feel unique. My greatest concern is that games won't feel unique enough without heroes and RNG. That is my greatest concern, because Age of Empires 4, SC2, SC1, eventually they may get boring to me because one game feels like the next. And I want every game to feel unique. And they still do. I just had a 4-on-4 where my Fireseer had a Lightning Orb and my Shadow had an Orb of Venom. I had 2 Staffs of Preservation and I had a Cloak of Flames on my Tarn Chieftain. I don't think I've ever had a game like that, despite having many thousands of games under my belt. Is there an estimate on release beta? Yeah, 2023, so that's a pretty big window. Games feeling unique secures great replayability. Yep. But you know, that's my feeling. SC2 is and has been very popular, despite not having heroes. So cannot argue that it is absolutely needed. That's just my preference. The answer to the unique question was not enough. No, yeah, I think so too. But like, they're not going to have an answer for everything, right? I wanted to ask them, will there be RNG? But I don't think I asked it, right? Not simply. So we don't know. I found one of the most interesting aspects of the interview is that they said they were playing games together. Do you remember that, guys? Remember that part, guys? RNG was asked by Back to Warcraft. There won't be any. Okay. I see. To your knowledge, are there any other RTS with this kind of RPG elements like hero leveling and items? Yeah, I think there's some. They said no RNG on damage. I don't know if they said no RNG at all. Right. I mean, there has to be some, right? Either you spawn top or bottom. Unless you queue up ladder, only wanting to be on the bottom of the map. I remember watching some documentary thing from Red Alert 2. They spend more time playing their iterations than working per day, lol. That's a good thing, IMO. I mean, QA is important, yes. Quality assurance, testing and whatnot. 15 damage Resident Sleeper, 14 to 16 damage Pog. Yeah. There's a Red Alert documentary? Yeah, that's actually a good question. Actually, I think I've seen it. So when can we have the version ready where Mountain King can make gold mines, guys? Grubby, you may have discussed this before. Why do you like RNG better than none? Because it leads to unexpected results. It leads to unexpected and non-repetitious results. It just creates a greater variance and leads to funny moments where people get fucked by bad RNG and I love to see them salty. And I get lucky and then it's funny. Or I get unlucky and then I know it wasn't my fault that I lost. You know, a lot of different variations that are just funny and funnier than just... because the moment you... I compare it to SE2. I haven't played dozens of RTS in the last couple of decades. I haven't played dozens. I've played just a handful. So I compare it to SE2. SE2 has no RNG. So I will be playing a game and I will be playing another game and another. And I played 20 PVZs and all 20 could feel the exact same as the other. That's my concern with that. I did enjoy the process. Like a monk, I am constantly training my one punch, my 1cm punch, and eventually I perfect it. But I am working on one thing and I know it. In Warcraft 3, I could play 20 games. I'm still working on improving my timings, but I have to adapt to 20 different permutations of a game that unfolds in a slightly unexpected way. Age of Empires' random map generation for every single game you play also leads you to have to remain on your feet and have variation. If you go too much in the StarCraft 2 direction, all you'll be asking one-on-one pro players is to shave off another second, over and over. Chess and Go have no RNG, still they're great games. Chess is boring as hell. No RNG, no graphics, no sound effects, no voice lines. It's not a great game to me. You may like it, but I don't like it. Chess has been figured out by bots. There's nothing else left to discover in chess. The only thing that's enjoyable about chess is if you are bad at it. Because you're not the best, chess will never last. The computer already beats humans. Everything else is inferior to the computer. Chess devs very lazy, yeah. Due to the figure-outability of chess, they use lower time controls to balance that for the top gems to keep it interesting for errors. That is fun. That is fun. I agree. I would find chess fun when you constantly push that limit of how fast you need to think. That's actually the only way that you can make streaming 4x games sustainable in the long run. If you have a very stiff timing clock. And that's kind of how Heroes of Might and Magic 3 is pretty much the only game that is being long-term streamed on Twitch. Is because they do play their multiplayer in a timer. Don't they? And when I did some Planetfall streaming, for my second stream that I played that game, I also did a multiplayer FFA with users where I gave us 1 or 2 minutes to play the turn, which is insane for that game. You need a lot more time to do it properly, which means you're going to make so many damn mistakes, but at least you're channeling it in a game pace that is more easily consumable by a Twitch crowd.